And these are the main three markets that we see really and then go globally. But even the global connectionists will always will reach out to the regulators, start the discussion from there, and formulate that relationship where, hey, we want to be there with you, we want to work with you. If you have a framework that is established, that is amazing, we want to see how we fit into it. If it's not yet, then we can really help as well to formulate some ideas towards that and accelerate the process towards it. So that is a very key point of success really for us. I think the other things, Brother Abdul Al-Hasib here, went through several challenges. Some of these are real impacts. So having, proper accessible talent in the region is not, is not easily accessible, but it is evolving. I think over the past 5 years, we see more talent coming in, but it's not really as a stage where you can be fully sustained within the talent in the region, so you still have to go beyond. The other thing, this, passporting element, if regulators can really come up with an idea, to ease that access, across the GCC countries, that would really help not only us, but any other fintech to just easily set up and utilize that speed of going to market. So yeah, those are the things that we would really do and need. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, so clear communication with the regulator is important. You mentioned passporting. Maybe IFSB can somehow help with regulation that are of interest for the Organization of Islamic Countries, because a uniform standard would definitely help. So thank you for that. Dr. Dalal, you mentioned already in your previous answer, but what in your opinion can be done more by regulators specifically to use innovation as an enabler for the wider ESG purpose?
So that's a very interesting question, because we're talking about ESG-focused fintech innovation. So that means you need two sets of regulations, both supporting ESG, and that's through redirecting, again, funding or capital to sustainable projects. And also on the fintech side is to provide the conducive environment for fintechs to develop their activities and scale up and basically extend their investor base beyond the markets they're operating at. So from fintech perspective, I think some of the factors have been already mentioned, like by Abdul Hasib, with regards to access to funding, and effectively that should include the various stages, the idea stage to the, let's say, the already established presence in certain markets. Unfortunately, that's not the case today, so we do need more innovative funding mechanisms, and that is supported, of course, by regulators as well. And in terms of developers, we need more regulatory sandboxes. If we look at the OIC landscape, where actually most of the countries are members of the IFSB, and also where we have few Islamic financial centers, only few have regulatory sandboxes, and that actually negatively impacts innovation when it comes to fintech. And on the other side, when talking about ESG, I think the key challenge is, until now, if we look at again the OIC landscape, most of the initiatives were institution-driven, in the sense that institutions took the initiative to report on sustainability or to integrate some form of ESG in their activities, and mainly the objective is really reputational and to have a branding in the market. So now we want to scale up that objective by having the regulatory support. So we've seen that, for example, in the European Union with the various guidelines of the EU Commission, and also in the ASEAN, which could be potentially a good region, addressing your previous point about collaboration in the region. So effectively, regional integration can be used as a driver to scale up both sustainable finance and ESG integration. So that's very interesting, because going back to the two questions we asked, actually, that we still have issues in Islamic financial markets of a large investor base and customer base who still think that ESG or sustainability is a nice to have. And one of the key reasons is this issue of greenwashing. So clear regulations would help provide more transparency actually to investors and issuance, and greenwashing challenge that some investors, unfortunately, and customers are still referring to when we mentioned actually the mobilization for sustainability and ESG. So that's what we need actually in this regulation. So more transparency and guidance on what metrics we can use when it comes to ESG. How to prioritize certain sectors as compared to other, and that's the alignment with national strategies and national development roadmaps and visions. I think all countries in the region have now national visions. And of course, supporting actually investors and customers in that decision-making process. And one of the key areas that we do need in the region is, for example, a clear taxonomy on sustainable finance that provides exactly that guidance on what qualifies as sustainable finance product or not.
Thank you very much. And the green taxonomy, the rules specifically for the countries that don't have them is important, will be addressed by the next panel. I have 1 minute, I believe. It's not fair for you, Nizamuddin, but short question and short answer. So listening to all this discussion, what are the challenges for a fintech journey? And you're in the midst of that journey. And what would you advise regulators and banks? Because you work with both of them.
I'll be very brief. So I think, firstly, we all have a challenge together as a group of fintech in the wider ESG ecosystem. Important. In terms of advice to regulators, I think, look, ultimately, consumer protection is at the heart of what a regulator is here to do. So on one end, you want to make sure you're protecting the consumer, but on the other end, you want to make sure we are helping enhance the consumer's experience, but also their ability to make the world a better place. And so therefore, we need disruption, we need innovation. And so some of the things that we've heard on the panel become incredibly important. How do you create enabling environments for fintechs, for ESG-focused fintechs to really emerge? So like, for example, I think, having said that, I also think it's now, and this might sound slightly opposite to what I've just said, it's now easier than ever to start a fintech. There are white labeling solutions everywhere. Thankfully, we are part of a team where we have a founder, Ziad Idris, who couldn't be here today, who had built a regulated financial institution beforehand. So therefore, we had the expertise. Technically, you don't need that level of expertise. And so I do think regulators could continue to be a little bit conservative when it comes to who can start a fintech, but equally find the right balance. Now, how do you find that balance? Is speaking to consumer groups, but also to the fintech community on a regular basis about how things need to happen in a way, in a very co-designed kind of way, effectively. And I think that's incredibly important. What we can't have is a community being disruptive on one end when technology is really evolving, and then a regulator sitting separately thinking, no, we're going to create a Chinese wall and we can't have a conversation between the two. From the bank's perspective, I think we are all here serving some of the biggest issues in the world and versus collaboration. The two things are not mutually exclusive, and I think we're going to see a world now where more and more the two merge. I think we've had siloed approaches where fintechs have emerged, they've grown, you now have had all these things happening. We've now got the technology that a lot of our banking colleagues need and want, and so I think we're going to see a lot more partnership and maybe mergers coming forward.
Thank you. Very clear message. Is basically, fintech is not here to disrupt. It creates stimulation and innovation. Yes, you need to have tough discussions with the regulator, and the bank of them together will move to the next phase. So, we could go on for hours, and I would encourage you to talk to the people individually if you have questions. I would like to thank the lady and gentleman very much. Give them a big round of applause. And we move to the next panel. Thank you very much.
That was a truly insightful discussion. Thank you to our panel speakers. May I welcome the next panel session speakers and moderators. The next session is ESG session. Innovation and Sustainable and Green Digital Technologies in the Islamic Financial Services Industry. For this discussion, we welcome our moderator, Mr. Ayman Dukali, Head of Islamic and Structured Finance at the QFC. He's also joined by our panelists, Mr. Hussein Abdullah, Co-Chief Executive Officer at Q Invest, Mr. Alexander Stevens, Chief Executive Officer at Greenamy, Mr. Diaku Makmalbaf, MENA at HSBC, Mr. Hussam Sultan, Head of ESG Solutions, Middle East, Africa and India at S&P Global, Mr. Executive Officer at Rayan Investments. Esteemed panelists, you now have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you, Nasser. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and once again, thank you for joining us today. So the latest trends and advancements within the fintech and how that impacts and continues to impact the future of the financial services industry. I think I'm joined now with an esteemed panel of experts and market practitioners to talk about the other trend that is impacting the financial services industry. Giaco, I would like to start with you. As we try to paint the picture for the audience on, what are the latest developments and the latest trends that are happening globally within the sustainable finance agenda, and what is the driving force behind it, be it from a regulatory or an investor sentiment perspective?
Okay, so putting this on. Okay, from a sustainable financial sector. As you know, from a sustainable financing side, we've seen the rise of green bonds and loans and sustainability linked